Good morning, everyone. I'm Howard Fillett. I'm the founding executive director and chief science officer for the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. I'm very honored and grateful to all of you for coming today and joining us in honoring Mel Goodes, who is an amazing man, and we're going to talk more about him throughout the morning and throughout our lunch here. And I especially want to thank Nancy Goodes, who's a member of our board, and really it was her inspiration that organized this award, and we're very proud to be working with Nancy in doing this. So thank you, Nancy. To get right to the program, it's truly my honor and pleasure to introduce Mr. Ronald Lauder. I have to say that it was in 1998, after working with the family for several years, that Ronald sat me down one day and said, "Howard, I want you to start a foundation for Alzheimer's disease, and if you don't do it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." And he was right that I did it. It's been certainly the best thing that I've ever done in my career, and it's been a great honor as a physician and a scientist to have the opportunity to create the organization. Ronald gave me a beautiful office in his suite, a desk and a chair in 1998, and some money to work with, and it's just been all uphill ever since then. So Ronald, thank you very, very much for doing this. You've really done something great for the world and for our field, so thank you so much.
Howard, I can't believe it's almost been 18 years, but you haven't changed. Still difficult, but absolutely, it was one of the best decisions I made. And the second best decision was having Leonard join us, who has done a remarkable job of moving this foundation along. Today we're here at a luncheon celebrating Melvin Goodes Prize for Excellence in Alzheimer's Drug Discovery. Obviously, there's a reason we're here, and Mel is not. 5 years ago, I looked at my calendar and I realized there was a luncheon at the Beer Hotel for ADDF, so I was late. So I ran into the luncheon, and it was at the Beer Hotel. I remember it was only 2 blocks from the office, and I got there out of breath, and everyone was sitting down, just finishing their first course. And Howard was walking up and introducing a gentleman from Warner Lambert, and I couldn't figure out why he was introducing this person. And I asked the person next to me, "Why is he introducing him?" And the person said, "You'll see." He was talking about Warner Lambert and the fact that this person, Mel Goodes, invented Lipitor, as Ronald Lauder did, in Cognex. But as Howard was speaking, I realized there was something weird in his voice. I said, "Something's the matter." Howard, who was always so up, was a little bit upset. I dismissed that when Mel came up to the podium, and with his strong presence, and he looked a lot to me like a cross between Gregory Peck and Gary Cooper. Then Mel proceeded to tell us about something that just happened to him. He told us that he was in the doctor's office and he was feeling great. He said his golf game had never been better. And although he forgot some names here and there, and sometimes even repeated himself, he chalked that up to natural aging. Then he told us the news. I'm quoting him. "What do you do," he asked us, "when your doctor says, 'I'm sorry, but you're in the early stages of Alzheimer's'?" At that moment, you could have heard a pin drop in the room. we all thought, if this man, so strong, so handsome, so successful, and happy, could get Alzheimer's, then who among us was safe? Mel said that at first he was determined to beat this disease. But soon, Mel the realist understood he could not. Without a cure, Mel explained, he understood what lay ahead of him, and Nancy and their entire family. So he told us, and again I'm quoting him, if you can't beat it, I will do everything I can to make sure that this dangerous disease is beaten. And that is what Nancy and Mel are doing with their generous gift of $750,000, which is being matched by Leonard and myself. And just like the leadership he demonstrated at Warner Lambert, Mel rallied the troops. He told us that we had to speed up the march of science because every minute counts. And that has not changed. 5 years later, this disease still must be conquered. Mel showed us that day what courage looked like, and he demonstrated with such incredible honesty that we all wondered if we could have done the same thing, if we could have been so forthright, if we were the ones with the diagnosis. I don't curse my bad luck, he told us. I have a wonderful life, a fabulous wife, a great family, and I'm surrounded by friends. We talk about a glass being half full. His was overflowing. More than anything else, he told us we did not have a minute to waste. We have to open our wallets and our hearts and stop this disease. That's why we're here today. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Mel's magnificent partner in life, his wife Nancy. No one can speak better about ending this disease and its treatments and the effect it has on the family than Nancy. Nancy, please come up. Nancy, good.
Thank you, Ronald, for that warm introduction, and thank you all for being here today. To set the stage for our announcement this afternoon for the first ever awarding of the Goodes Prize for Excellence in Alzheimer's Drug Discovery, let me take you back nearly 20 years when Mel was chair and CEO of Warner Lambert. As many of you know, Mel and his leadership team brought Warner Lambert back from the brink. The company became one of the brightest of the blue chips, thanks in part to Mel's big bet on a drug now known as Lipitor. In 1997, with the company's future secured, Mel assembled his leadership team and made an unusual request. He wanted to give every Warner Lambert employee, all 42,000 of them, in more than 150 countries, a special gift to mark their shared accomplishment. He had that gift in mind, a wristwatch, and not a cheapie, think top-of-the-line Seiko. There were 100 of obstacles in the way, from tax laws to religious restriction, but Mel and his team got it done. Some 42,000 watches were made, engraved, and distributed. Taxes were paid, borders were crossed, even religious preferences were accounted for. A lot of employees asked Mel, why a watch? He said, as a symbol of what we've achieved together and as a reminder that our work is not done. As Mel put it, time flies, so does opportunity. And when it comes to changing the course of Alzheimer's, every day, every hour, every minute counts. The Melvin R. Goodes Prize for Excellence in Alzheimer's Drug Discovery reflects both the spirit of shared achievement and the urgency of a search for a cure. The Goodes Prize will go to an accomplished Alzheimer's research team to celebrate their accomplishments and to provide them with a way to speed up the science. The prize is a $150,000 grant to support the winner's future research, along with a commitment to fund this prize for at least 10 years. The ADDF is generously matching our Goodes family in the hope that others will join us in this quest for a solution. Needless to say, choosing the first recipient of the Goodes Prize was not easy. We had many applications from all over the R&D community. The selection committee, which is completely independent of our family, carefully considered proposals from a number of the nation's most prominent scientists. The selection of Dr. Frank Longo, who you will meet shortly, reflects not only his accomplishments as chair of the Department of Neurology and Neurological Sciences at Stanford, but also his team's commitment to keep pressing on. It's that combination of achievement and urgency that led the selection committee to choose Dr. Longo as the first ever recipient of the Goodes Prize. I hope that as he puts his grant to work, Dr. Longo and his staff remember the leader for whom it's named, Mel Goodes. Many of you were witnesses here 5 years ago when Mel told the world that he was an Alzheimer's patient and that he was not going gently into the good night. I wish Mel could be with us now, but after years of serving as the face of Alzheimer's, he can no longer shoulder that burden. Mel told us years ago that Alzheimer's is pitching a perfect game. That game is now in its late innings. I am grateful that Mel's glowing personality still stands tall against Alzheimer's, although Mel himself only knows the moment. Like many of you, I miss the Mel Goodes that is disappearing. Like all of you, I curse the disease that is taking both my beloved husband and my beloved mother. Let us take solace in knowing that thanks to 3 generations of dedicated scientists, we are learning more each day about the mysteries of Alzheimer's, and that because of visionaries like the Lauders and Dr. Howard Phillott, and with your generosity and unflagging support, we are exploring approaches that would have gone unexplored. If Mel could be with us today, he'd applaud the accomplishments of Dr. Longo and so many other scientific leaders, even as he would remind them that every minute another American is diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Mel often said that the key to his success was a relentless discontent with the way things are. Through the ADDF and now through the Goodes Prize, we continue to share that discontent. Fueled by hope, love, and generosity, we press on to knowing what our destination will be, Alzheimer's conquered once and for all. Thank you.
What do you do when you talk with your doctor and your doctor says the following, the only words you don't want to hear? I'm sorry, you have early stage Alzheimer's. I remember my first reaction, but doc, I feel fine. In fact, I feel great. Warner Lauder was a very broadly based company at that time. We had consumer products, we had pharmaceuticals, I had an operation responsibility in Japan. And I guess I caught some notice because after a string of leadership jobs, in 1991, I became chairman of Warner Lauder. Some people thought I was a perfect sucker for the job. Some of them are here today.
In 1997, he hit pay dirt with a cholesterol-reducing drug called Lipitor. Lipitor became one of the fastest-growing drugs in history. Sales topped $2.2 billion in 1998.
Thanks very much.
And that's it. After 34 years, it's all over. Mel Goodes is one of those increasingly rare people, a company man who rose through the ranks and saved the company.
You know, I know that my dad's dad had Alzheimer's, but at that point I was so young when I saw him, I didn't really understand. I just thought, oh, you know, he's just old.
He came home from the golf course and he was really upset. Somebody had accused him of cheating on the golf course because he couldn't remember his score.
Yeah.
I knew that there was something happening.
At first I just thought maybe it was just he wasn't paying attention.
He'd repeat certain things or ask you a question about something that he had just asked.
We had talked to Nancy about getting him tested and understanding what that's about.
And we were really concerned about what he would think when he found out the diagnosis.
And I said to the doctor, how do I tell him? What do I tell him? And he said, well, you don't have to tell him. You can give him the pills. There's really nothing you can do. And if he doesn't want to know, don't tell him.
Mel and I worked with a fellow, and unfortunately he came down with Alzheimer's, and then he kind of just disappeared, and it was like a big loss.
We were all petrified to tell him the diagnosis, and he found it through a piece of mail, I think, that he opened up, and he said, "It's a big deal. Why didn't you tell me this?"
And we drove home the 3 hours from Lenox, and
One
it
of
was
the best conversations we ever
yeah,
had.
because it was just such a weight off his shoulders to finally come clean. We decided then to immerse ourselves in and get as educated as we could, and talk to the family.
Originally, it's tough to say to them, and I could see the tears in their eyes pouring down, and I tried not to break down, and I don't think I did that much. Right now I am, but they knew me, that I was a pretty determined guy, and that I'm going to go on and do whatever I can. Why should I penalize myself because somebody says, "Oh God, I got Alzheimer's, and how am I ever going to get over this, and how am I going to get this, and this hurts today, and this hurts tomorrow." Okay, what are you going to do about it? And sometimes some people say to me, "Well, how do you ever get so optimistic? Why shouldn't I go on? What else can I suffer from?" You probably can fight for a number of years and be much more vibrant, involved, and enjoying life. It's tough when you start thinking about your kids in that context, but you say, hey, somebody's got to solve this, and somebody's got to do it soon.
You can cure almost any disease if you treat it, and that's what's not happening with Alzheimer's. Maybe there will be a drug that'll slow the progression.
What gives you justifications for wanting to continue living? It isn't to go in and say, how long do I have till I die? Despite the news of my Alzheimer's diagnosis, I don't curse my luck. I've had a fabulous life, and I'm going to take my best shot at beating the odds, because honestly, I don't know any other way to act. My hope for today, that I will remember forever the noble efforts of ADDF, the wonderful work of its supporters, and the excitement we feel today about the therapies to come in the future. Let's keep the hope alive with our generosity, our passion, and our spirit. Thank you very much.
I've seen that video several times, and it still gives me goosebumps. I think Mel represents so many attributes of what's great about our world and about the people in it. Mel developed drugs, and somewhat ironically, but characteristically, Mel brought the first drug for Alzheimer's disease to market in 1995. And that drug was called Cognex, and it was a bad drug. It had a lot of toxicity. It caused liver problems, but it did improve cognition. And Mel saw back then, before most of us had any awareness of Alzheimer's disease, the importance of bringing a drug to market to really bring this field out into the open. So as a drug developer, as the chief executive of a major pharmaceutical company, Mel was the first, ironically, to do that. And I think we should recognize him for that. And then as a patient and as a family, this is really 5 years ago, just like cancer came out of the closet decades ago. It's not just Mel's courage in talking about his disease, but it's also the courage of the family and Mel in talking to each other about the disease. As Nancy mentioned in the video, very often I counsel patients who are afraid to use the A word with their loved ones, that you don't have to tell them it's Alzheimer's, because it doesn't matter that much exactly what you say. You can say memory loss, you can say you're taking these pills for your memory loss. Maybe it's too scary for patients. But Mel wanted to know and his family wanted to know. And as you heard, as a result of that, there was great relief. And there was a way for the family to come together and to deal with this handicap, which it is, a disability, and progressive cognitive decline. And it is so sad that Mel's not here with us today because he can't be. And really only a few short years ago, he was giving that wonderful speech. So we see the courage in him as a patient, and we see the courage in his family to address the illness and to love him even though he is demented. And the other thing is that Mel and his family are great philanthropists. And as Mel said, okay, we're going to fight this. How can we fight this? And of course, we're very grateful here at ADDF that he chose us, that he had faith in us, that he decided to work with us. I think that one reason is because we are the only drug discovery foundation that I know of, the only foundation that really just focuses solely and 100% of the time on drug discovery. And we're very grateful to Mel and his family for working with us and for choosing us and for being great philanthropists, because again, in the fight against Alzheimer's and what people can do, philanthropy plays such a critical role in our society. And so we're very grateful to the family and to be able to partner with the family and to match the family for this award. And so just to close, we're going to award Frank the first and the only drug discovery award for Alzheimer's disease today. It's so fitting that this is the Mel Goodes Award. Thank you so much. I'm glad everyone's having a really good conversation. I want to go on to the award time now, if I may. So this award is unique in our field. There have been a few other awards in the Alzheimer's field, MetLife, Potemkin, and a couple of others. And they're smaller awards or possibly close to the same size, but none of them have been for drug discovery. And really, drug discovery per se is mostly about chemistry, and people think it's not as creative, but it's the way that we get to discover drugs. And so what I like to say is that when we're funding basic research, we're funding the development of new knowledge, but we're not funding the development of new drugs. And what we all want in the research is ultimately the translation of that knowledge into drugs. And the drug discovery is a completely different science from basic research, from basic neurobiology research, which perhaps teaches us how a disease happens, but has no intent on developing a drug. So drug discovery involves things what we call high throughput screening, learning how to screen for drugs, a lot of chemistry. There are these wizards out there called medicinal chemists. We actually have a couple, I think, in the audience from our scientific committee. And these people are amazing. They're scientists who, in their mind's eye, can see a molecule. And they can look at that molecule from a grant application or on a piece of paper, and they can literally tell you whether or not that molecule has even the potential to ever be a drug, because there are certain characteristics of molecules that they'll look at it and they'll say, that can never be a drug. And then the other thing that the medicinal chemists do, and I've been at board meetings like this on biotech companies and things, is they know how to synthesize things, which is amazing. And so they'll start with what we call a chemical probe or a core compound, and that'll be sort of the basis, and they'll see if it has a biological effect on a target, what we call a target, like amyloid. And then they'll start refining that molecule. And you know, you're really looking at like clear water, basically. But they're able to know how to do synthesis and scale up and maybe synthesize 100 or 1,000 different molecules so that we can refine this into better and better drugs that ultimately for Alzheimer's disease also have the challenge of not only being orally available if they're small molecules, but also getting in the brain. And then the next phase is testing that small molecule in an animal model of Alzheimer's, and we've been able to cure animals with Alzheimer's something over 400 times now. Of course, animals don't write books, so very often we have a very high failure rate when we ultimately get into human beings. And actually getting into human beings is a real challenge. It's the next gap in financing and science, because it's not sexy to do the safety and the toxicity and the other regulatory things that need to be done to take a molecule and put it through what FDA says you have to put it through to do that first test in human beings, which is, it costs, let's say, $2 million. It takes maybe a year or two. But you know, donors don't like to fund, the government doesn't like to fund what we call IND, investigational new drug research, because it presumably doesn't create new knowledge, when in fact it's the only hurdle that gets you from the mouse into human beings. And then phase 1 is safety and toxicity. First time in human beings, you give that pill. And then phase 2 is the first time that a drug is actually tested in patients to see if it works. Now, Frank and I got together back in 2002, and Frank had, Dr. Longo had an idea which was really revolutionary at the time. And his idea was to create a drug that would take advantage of evolution, basically. And the idea was that in Alzheimer's disease, there are many, many different ways that the brain cells get injured. And so a lot of drug programs are trying to hit one of those ways. Even the amyloid story is one of those ways. So you can imagine that if you just fixed one of those pathways, like inflammation or whatever, the others would still be there. And so you might make an incremental benefit on the disease, but it might not be, I won't say the cure because that would be amazing, but it might not be that effective. But through evolution, what cells, particularly brain cells, have evolved is a way to survive in the face of any kind of injury. And we call that neuroprotection. And so if you activate the neuroprotective pathways in the cell, then regardless pretty much of the kind of injury that that cell suffers, you can prevent the cell from getting sick and dying. That's very simplistic, but that's kind of the story of these neurotrophins. Now, Frank had, there was a history of this molecule that Frank is currently working on called NGF, nerve growth factor, which is one of these neurotrophins, one of these neuroprotective factors that are naturally occurring in the brain. And we knew that it was around for a while. We knew about it. It was discovered by a woman in Italy, Dr. Montalcini, I think her name is. I know I got that wrong. She got the Nobel Prize for the discovery of this molecule. Some biotech companies tried to deliver this to the brain, a lot of failure. We funded a gene therapy program. So because the molecule's really big, you can't really deliver it to the brain. So the drug discovery challenge was to figure out how to make a pill that people could take orally that would mimic the effect of nerve growth factor, this big molecule that could never be a drug, but you could mimic that by making a pill. Now, the challenge was that in all the human studies of nerve growth factor, there were serious side effects because the receptor for this thing had 2 arms, and the nerve growth factor hit both arms, and one of the arms was the survival pathway, and the other arm led to an overgrowth of the neurons, pain, and it was a complete failure. So Frank's challenge was to figure out how to make a small molecule that only hit the side that promoted the protective signaling. And by the way, also part of that was linked to death signaling. So the cell, another complication is that the same factor can also initiate death in the cell, called apoptosis. And that was, you know, to simplify it, evolution said, if the cell gets so sick, it's got to get out of the way. So we're just going to kill ourselves and get out of the way before we cause too much damage. So Frank had these challenges in trying to design a small molecule that would only affect the part of the receptor that hit the survival mechanism. Now, that's really never been done before. No one had ever developed a small molecule to do that. Now, at the time that we first met Frank, he was at the University of California, San Francisco, and he had this idea, and we knew the structure, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder here. No. Okay, and we knew the structure of the receptor, and Frank had it on his computer, and it was in 3 dimensions. So what we first funded Frank to do in 2002, I think it was to buy computer programs and what we call libraries of chemicals. And he bought a software library of 2 million chemicals. And working with a medicinal chemist named Steve Massa, over a period of a year or 2, he screened this library to see which of these chemicals on the computer fit in exactly where it needed to go to do that signaling. And so we funded that project, and from that, Frank found 60 chemicals out of 2 million. And I think we funded the next phase, which was to buy those 60 in powder form and test them on cells to see if they actually worked. And from that, Frank chose, I think, 4, if I remember right, 4 out of 2 million, and started pushing these forward towards the animal studies. And so the journey began. The journey began in 2002. We're in 2015. In 2005, 2007, 2005, Frank had moved to become chairman of neurology at University of North Carolina. We followed him there. And one day Frank and I were talking, and I said to Frank, I think I did, I'm going to take credit where it's not due, but I said to Frank, I think if you're going to pursue this further, we need to start a biotech company. Because you can't do all of this in academia. You need to have access to more money than academia is going to provide you. The foundation can't provide you with all of this. And so we were founders with Frank and UNC in the founding of Pharmatrophics, which is Frank's biotech company. And then Frank finally moved to become chairman of neurology and neuroscience at Stanford, where Frank is the chairman of the department, of 2 departments really, neurology and neuroscience, has a private practice, and I'm a physician scientist, and I can tell you there's no better person on earth than a physician scientist. I don't know. I mean, we have perspectives as doctors and scientists that I can tell you that scientists don't have and doctors don't have as sole persons in research. And so Frank wears a lot of hats. He's also the founder of this biotech company, and has this one project has been the passion of his professional life. About 3 years ago, we gave him some money, I think, for what I called the IND enabling work, the work that finally started the process of getting through the FDA to bring these drugs into human beings. And through all of this, the foundation at this point was making investments in the company. Got FDA approval. The drug went through phase 1 testing. It's shown safety. And in the last year or 2, we've worked together to design the phase 2 clinical trial and get some money into that. And Frank's got a first-class group of investors now, which we hope to be one of them, to fund the phase 2 trial, which will be the first time that the drug will be tested in humans to see if it actually works. So 13 years, I'd say we did it really quite efficiently with just several million. I don't know what the total is, but not, you know, the 50 million perhaps that pharma might have invested at this point. And it's amazing that an academic scientist like Frank, with a new idea, has come up with really what will be a revolutionary drug if it works, because it's neuroprotective. And so we're going to test it first, or Frank's going to test it first, in Alzheimer's disease, but if it works, it will work for other neurodegenerative illnesses, and it could be a breakthrough and a blockbuster for several reasons. One is because I described about the way the drug works, mimicking these neurotrophins. It'll open up a whole new field, and in fact, one of the other programs that we're funding at the company right now is a program on what's called BDNF, which is an even more powerful neurotrophic factor than NGF. So that's why Frank was nominated by our selection committee, and some of the members of the selection committee are here today, and we thank them for participating in the external validation. We had a number of candidates, but the group as a whole, almost unanimously, I would say, recognized Frank worldwide as the first honoree because he really epitomizes the greatness of the physician scientist, of the drug discoverer, of the academic scientist with a new idea who then becomes a biotech entrepreneur, who's worked passionately over the years to develop drugs for Alzheimer's disease. And so I want to thank the family, Nancy Goodes and Goodes family, for having this idea. Thank you, Nancy. And we're very proud to partner with you to make this award possible for the first time. And we're very glad that the announcement of this award will bring recognition because, as many of you know, scientists at universities get recognition for publishing papers and doing basic research, but they rarely, if ever, get recognition for doing the hard work and the unique work that ultimately leads to the discovery and the development of a new drug, a pill that each one of us could take one day that would prevent and treat Alzheimer's disease. That will be amazing. So with that, let me introduce Frank Longo.
Well, thank you, Howard, for those very generous remarks. And I'm almost speechless, but I do have a few things I'd like to share with you. I'll share some experiences in this adventure of developing Alzheimer's drugs, and I'd also like to acknowledge really key people. I'd like to start with the Goodes family, Nancy and your children. Thank you so much for making this award possible. When Howard called me with the news, I was stunned and really gratified, and thank you very much. And also with the ADDF and the Lauders for supporting this. So as Howard mentioned, this has been a long but exciting journey. The ADDF made it possible for us to start this research back in 2002 with this crazy idea of unleashing this very powerful biology of protective mechanisms to see if we can come up with an effective treatment for Alzheimer's. I look at Alzheimer's as a powerful, robust disease. Chipping away at the edges won't provide effective therapies. We really need to go at it equally aggressively, and we think we've tapped into an aggressive approach. And ADDF made it possible for us to get started. As Howard mentioned, to really move on to drug development, we had to start a company, which I've enjoyed doing. And again, ADDF made it possible for us to start Pharmatropics, to do the commercial development. I want to acknowledge my academic lab teams. They're the ones that do all the research here, spending thousands of hours at the microscope, counting synaptic connections, dealing with hundreds and hundreds of mice. None of this would be possible without my colleagues. My colleague Steve Massa, who figured out how to do the in silico screening on the computer, has played a major role. Also wanted to thank the members of the selection committee. They're my peers. I love getting their criticism and bouncing ideas off of them. Many of my families that I treat ask me, they're concerned that we compete too much in science and we're siloed. But I have to tell you that ADDF has made it possible for me to get to know some of the best people in the field who helped us. So I look at this as a shared award with my friends who are here on the selection committee. Thank you very much. We've all really done this work together, and without your input, we'd never make it this far. Susanna from the National Institutes of Aging is here. Many of you know how hard it is to get NIH funding, and we've been successful a number of times with developing this drug, and you can't be successful at NIH. You need two things: great science, but also a guide to get one through this complicated maze. Thank you so much for getting us through this and really making this possible. Also, we wouldn't be here without your help. I'd also need to acknowledge my patients. Every Friday you'll find me at the Stanford Center for Memory Disorders. This is where I get in touch in reality. Those of us in academics, we tend to get caught up on publishing papers and curing mice. You can get all promoted to a full tenured professor treating those mice. And all your papers and grants say that this work will someday lead to a therapy, but you don't have to get out into the ring, into the arena, and really get into the human trials. You'll be fine. In fact, you'll be safe if you stay with the mice. But I can't go to my clinic every Friday and stay with the mice. I can't do that. I'm seeing patients that are affected with Alzheimer's. I need to do better than mice. And so, again, ADDF has made it possible for us to get into the human arena. So I thank my patients and families for that inspiration, and some of them have given us gifts at Stanford that help make our work possible. When we finally got FDA approval to do the first phase 1 trial, because our drug is new, an entirely new mechanism, the FDA required that phase 1 were the so-called normal subjects, just for safety. It was real exciting to get that FDA approval, and our company hired a contract research organization based in Kansas to do the phase 1 testing in normals. So these are people who volunteer. They get paid a little bit to be the first people ever to take this entirely brand new drug. And as a clinician, or just as a person, I took this really seriously. I flew to Kansas. There was another physician that was in charge. But I wanted to be there to see the first person take this drug. Kind of emotional about this because this is a 20-year effort. And again, my peers are in mice. To have something that your team has developed and watch a human being take it for the first time was really a remarkable experience. He was a volunteer surrounded by nurses and doctors, monitored blood, heart, EKG, blood pressure, and takes the pill. And everybody's staring at him. And they made me stand at a distance. And he took it. They had him open his mouth. They put a flashlight in there to make sure he swallowed it. He did, and he was fine. I spent the whole day there because I wanted to make sure he'd be fine, and he was fine. Anyway, 60 people took our drug. Some of them took placebo, and they were all fine. And so we made it through phase 1 without any serious adverse events, which was amazing, number 1, because they were okay. And number 2, because it set us up to get into Alzheimer's patients. We're hoping to start second quarter, hopefully in 2016, with the first time in Alzheimer's patients. And again, it's the ADDF that's helping make this possible. The phase 2 is expensive. Phase 1 was expensive. ADD played key roles in key points. But I have to say the big chunk of the funding came from our company. And our company is going through the valley of death. How does a small biotech startup come up with the $8, $9, $10 million that costs? And all of the credit there is due to my wife, Ann Longo. She's the CEO of our company. Given my role at Stanford, I can't be a direct officer of our company. I'm chairman of the board, but I'm not the CEO. And Ann took it under her wing to go out and raise that kind of funding, and she did it. And everyone told us, you can't do that. You cannot raise that amount of funding from a very small group of informed people, but she did it. And without her, we wouldn't be getting ready to do a 2A trial. And my kids, who are 12 and 14, have put up with Dad being away at meetings and late at work and all the things that we do in science, but they think it's really neat. And they hope to be there when our first Alzheimer's patients take our drug. So I just want to sum up by thanking my colleagues who in my lab, my research teams who do all the work while I'm writing grants, my colleague Steve Massa, ADDF for being there at the key times, every time, my friends at NIH, my scientific colleagues, the Goodes family, and Mel Goodes. I read about Mel when Howard called me. What an inspiration. I noticed that he had Canadian roots. I was born in Ontario, Canada. I was 2 when my family moved to California, but I noticed Mel coming from Canada, where many of my cousins and family still live. I was impressed by his tenacity. That's what this field's all about. Look what he did, turning a major company around, all with the goal of helping people. So it's just professional devotion is just such an inspiration to me. And then on the personal level, facing this disease with such courage, again, is so inspiring to me. So it's just an amazing honor to really receive this award, given Mel Goodes' legacy. I'm just so happy. So I want to thank all the supporters here of ADDF, because your support of ADDF has made each key point possible. And what I often say to my patients and families who give us gifts at Stanford, what works someday in Alzheimer's, I guarantee I'll be able to trace back, all the way going back, and at those beginning stages, there will be people who made gifts that made it all possible. I'm completely convinced of that. You are the people doing that. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thanks, Frank. Congratulations for all the hard work that you do every day fighting this disease. It's an honor to stand here before this impressive group of individuals. It's a privilege to also stand here representing my 2 sisters, Michelle and Melanie, and our dad, Mel Goodes. The development of the Goodes Prize is something very important to us. And in the spirit of our dad, we're proud to provide an award to a courageous researcher who, despite the odds, presses on with their truly important work. When we were presented with this idea, Nancy was all over it in staunch support, as only she can be. As proud as we are, we look forward to the day when the Goodes Prize is irrelevant. Only irrelevant because we, mankind, would have defeated Alzheimer's and broken up its perfect game. We, the Goodes family, are incredibly fortunate for so many things. First, we're fortunate to be able to make a difference in the fight against Alzheimer's disease, as my dad has done so clearly and bestowed upon us. Second, we're fortunate to be in a financial position where we could provide an award to Frank this year and subsequent trailblazers for their incredible work. But most importantly, we're so incredibly fortunate to be able to call Mel Goodes our dad. He's done so much for many of us in this room. Even today, although less aware of the lessons he's teaching, continues to show us the strength of positive thinking, courage, and determination. He's a principled man who does it his way. To quote Frank Sinatra, he's lived a life that's full. He's traveled each and every highway. Much more than this, he did it his way. I want to thank you for your attention and support, and have a great afternoon. We look forward to seeing you all next year for another recipient of the Goodes Prize.
Now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friends, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway and more, much more than this. I did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If he has not, then he has not. to say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows and did it my way.
Thank you all for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.